News poll gives the coalition an election-winning primary vote of 47%. Labor's primary has been stuck in the low 30s for several months now. The Greens steady at 10. Two-party preferred, Coalition 56, Labor 44. And backing as the better Prime Minister, Julia Gillard has 37%, Tony Abbott 42%. Each Tuesday, Nielsen's John Stirton joins us. He's in our Sydney studio today. John, welcome in to the program. Is there much to tell from these numbers apart from the story that we've been seeing for the last few months or not?
No, look, nothing much has changed at all, Tim, since the end of January, when we did see a move away from Labor and towards the coalition of about 3 or 4 percentage points, taking the usual sort of variability in the polls over the last few months. Since then, we haven't really seen any change. The polling over the last day or so, if anything, has moved away from Labor by a point, but really a point is within margin of error. Unless we see that repeated over the next few polls, few weeks, we've really got to say nothing much has changed. It's very flat, and the swing against Labor remains at about 5 to 6% since the last election.
And this would not worry Labor heads so much if it were after a poor or even a mediocre week from Labor. But you would have thought they'd count the National Disability Insurance Scheme and the way it tracked last week as a positive week for them.
Yes, I think you'd be a bit worried if you were Labor, having had a good week and the Prime Minister having had a clear, I think, policy and tactical victory over the opposition. No change in the numbers. So really what that suggests is that people have very fixed views about the government and the opposition, and their current voting intentions look fairly fixed, and as I say, hasn't moved now for several months.
There is an expectation, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's an expectation of the gap narrowing as we get near an election. Usually these kind of gaps do. When does that period where Australians really closely analyse what's going on typically begin, do you think, before an election?
Look, Tim, there's no rules about this. In previous elections, sometimes you get a slight narrowing, or it gets a bit closer when the election is called. Now, the election's already been called, but I guess there'll be a point at which everyone agrees the campaign proper has started, and perhaps then it'll get a little bit tighter. But it doesn't always happen. It just sometimes happens. In 1996, when John Howard won, he was ahead about 54-46, and he was ahead 54-46 for the 12 months leading up to the election. There was no change in the numbers with the election announcement, and he got a victory with about 54% of the two-party preferred vote. So sometimes it does change, sometimes it doesn't. Historically, though, federal elections are relatively close. A 54%, which Howard got in 96, is considered a pretty big gap, a big result. Rudd's numbers in 2007, he got 53 to 47. So I'm expecting it to narrow a little bit, but unless something dramatic happens, I don't think it's going to narrow a great deal.
How do you expect the entry of mining industry figure Clive Palmer to play out as we go to the election and, of course, on election night?
I suspect he won't. The Palmer's United Australia Party won't have much impact at all. The only place that it might get some votes is in the Senate, or where it might affect results is in the Senate, but it would only be taking votes away from the coalition, or at least mostly from the coalition. When Pauline Hanson set up One Nation about 15 years ago, her party got most of its votes from the coalition. In fact, took votes from the coalition over Labor at a 3-to-1 ratio. That means for every vote Labor lost to One Nation, the coalition lost 3. I'd expect that would be the pattern with Palmer's party, except I think it'll be a lot fewer votes than Pauline Hanson took. I think Palmer and United Australia Party are going to be more of a distraction than anything else.
So what about Bob Katter and his influence then? Tell us how that might compare to the Palmer influence.
I suspect Katter's influence will be greater. Katter's Australian Party got over 11% of the vote in last year's Queensland election, and if they repeat that, that's getting close to a Senate seat on first preferences. So I think Katter's party is likely to be more influential politically and have a greater impact on the election than Clive Palmer's party. But having said that, I don't think either party will affect the overall result or affect the lower house at all.
John Stirton, as always, great to talk to you. Thanks for coming on Breaking Politics.
Thanks, Tim.